remain Senator Sabo Mohammed, representing Jigawa Southwest. I rise to present the report of the Senate Joint Committee on Downstream Petroleum Sector, Petroleum Resources Upstream and Gas, on a bill for an act to provide for legal governance, regulatory, and physical framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and for other related matters, 2021. Distinguished colleagues, if you recall, the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria at its sitting on Tuesday, 20th October 2020, read for the first time a bill for an act to provide for legal governance, regulatory, and physical framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and for related matters, 2020. I referred same to the Joint Committee on Downstream Petroleum Sector, Petroleum Resources Upstream, and Gas for further legislative action. The executive bill was read at plenary for the first time on Wednesday, 30th September 2020. Mr. President, the objectives of this bill, the bill consists of 5 distinct and logically connected chapters: governance and institutions, administration, host community development, petroleum industry and physical framework, and miscellaneous provisions, comprising 319 clauses and 18 schedules. Chapter 1 describes in great detail how to create an efficient and effective governing institution with clear and separate roles for petroleum industry. Establish a framework for the creation of a commercially oriented and profit-driven national petroleum company. C, promote transparency, good governance, and accountability in the administration of petroleum resources of Nigeria, among others. Chapter 2 deals with the general administration of the entire value chain. It promotes the exploration and exploitation of petroleum resources in Nigeria for the benefit of the Nigerian people. The efficient and effective sustainable development of the petroleum industry and the liberalization of the midstream and downstream petroleum industry, among other objectives. Chapter 3 describes how to foster sustainable peace and prosperity within host communities, provides direct social and economic benefits for the petroleum operations to host communities, and creates a framework to support the development of host communities, amongst others. Chapter 4, Mr. President, establishes a globally competitive and progressive physical framework which places Nigeria as a desired investment destination in Africa, balancing rewards with risk and enhancing revenues to the federal government of Nigeria, and a forward-looking, easy-to-implement physical framework with clarity, transparency, effectiveness, and enhances the revenue base of the Federation while ensuring a better return on investment. Chapter 5 deals with miscellaneous provisions. Methodology. In order to carry out this assignment effectively, the Joint Committee resolved to adopt the following methodology: conduct a public hearing in order to collect inputs from critical stakeholders and indeed the entire Nigerian people. Review the bill as well as the memorandum submitted by stakeholders during public hearing. Examine other issues that the Joint Committee considers germane to the successful implementation, to the successful conduct of the assignment. Embark on on-the-spot assessment of impacted oil exploration communities. Critically examine issues raised by distinguished senators during the second reading of the bill and consult widely on the justification for passing the bill into law. The Joint Committee, in processing this bill, placed paid advertisement on printed and electronic media, inviting stakeholders and general public to submit memoranda and to attend the public hearing. The Joint Committee also sent special invitations to stakeholders in both public and private sectors, requesting them to attend the public hearing and also make presentations. Public hearing. The Joint Committee on Monday 25th and Tuesday 26th January conducted a two-day public hearing to elicit views from stakeholders and the general public on the merits of the proposed bill. The public hearing was declared open by the President of the Senate. A total of 52 memoranda were received by the Joint Committee, while 60 stakeholders from all spectrum of the petroleum industry, including public and private institutions, attended the session and made presentations. Assessment of refineries and host communities. The Joint Committee visited Kaduna Refinery and Petrochemical Company, Dangote Refinery, Port Harcourt Refinery, between 22nd and 26 February 2021 to assess the state of these entities. The Joint Committee also undertook the on-the-spot assessment of host communities to assess the impact of oil exploration and interacted with members of the host communities across the oil-producing states. Legislative action. The Joint Committee held several meetings, consultations, and retreats in the course of processing this bill and painstakingly analyzed the presentations made at the public hearing, considered necessary reviews with emphasis on inputs made by the stakeholders, and came up with a final report prescribing amendments to a total of 752 provisions, out of which about 56 are substantial amendments, as recommended by stakeholders and accepted by the Joint Committee. Other subsequent amendments relate to typos, errors, cross-referencing, as well as realignment of provisions as contained in the bill. Specifically, the provisions that are consistent with the intendment of the bill were retained as against the ambiguous ones that were consequently deleted. Others were reframed and renumbered, while new vital insertions were made. General institutions. The Joint Committee, after several stakeholders' engagements, streamlined the regulatory and commercial role of the Commission. This is in addition to amendments to the funding and operations of both the Commission and the authority, with this chapter seeks to establish. The bill, when passed into law, will strengthen the accountability, transparency of the NNPC Limited as a full-fledged Kama company under statutory regulations, oversight with better returns to its shareholders, the Nigerian people. Frontier business. The Joint Committee's recommendation recognizes the need for the country to urgently and aggressively explore and develop the country's frontier basins to take advantage of foreseeable threats to the funding of fossil fuel projects across the world due to speedy shifts from fossil fuel to other alternative energy sources. To this end, the committee recommends funding mechanism of 30% of NNPC Limited's share profit and profit gas as in the production sharing profit and the risk service contract to fund the exploitation of the frontier business. A total of 110 amendments were recommended to this chapter, while others were retained. Administration, Chapter 2. The Joint Committee's recommendation in this chapter is to ensure effective and efficient administration of the country's oil and gas industry. The various obsolete laws currently in operation in the country have been updated and consolidated in this chapter to meet global competitiveness and best practices. A total of 355 amendments were recommended to this chapter, while others were retained. Host communities development. This chapter highlights the effective and efficient administration of the host communities trust fund, which is to be anchored by the settler, i.e. the oil and gas companies operating in the host communities. The various recommended provisions, when passed into law, will ensure a peaceful operating environment that will have a positive impact on the cost of oil and gas production, which has been the bane of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. After extensive engagement with various stakeholders and on-the-spot assessment visits to host communities across the country, the Joint Committee recommended strengthening measures and saddle the host communities with responsibilities with a view to reducing or completely eradicating interferences and tampering in the country's oil and gas production assets. Furthermore, to ensure adequate development of the host communities and reduction in the cost of production, the Joint Committees recommend 5% of the actual operating expenditure of the preceding financial year in the upstream petroleum operations affecting the host communities for funding of the host communities trust fund. A total of 20 amendments were recommended to this chapter, while others were retained. Chapter 4, Petroleum Industry Physical Framework. Nigeria's global competitiveness is tested in this chapter, as it determines capital investment inflow to the oil and gas industry. It should, however, be stated here that in the past 10 years, the country has only attracted less than 5% of the over 100 billion capital investment inflow into Africa's oil and gas industry. The recommended provisions in this chapter, when passed into law, will attract and unlock the long-awaited capital investment inflows to the country's oil and gas industry, since it contains enhanced incentives in land, swamp, shallow, deep water terrains. Provisions have been made for better and attractive tax incentives to achieve this goal. A total of 96 amendments were recommended to this chapter, while others were retained. Miscellaneous. This chapter captures savings provisions in this bill based on the two options available to the operators on its voluntary conversion to either the new fiscal policy regime or maintain status quo until the expiration of the said lease or license upon which the provisions of this bill takes effect. Schedules. The bill comprises of 8 schedules as follows. First schedule, generally assert the minister's right to preemption in line with various circumstances in the country. Second schedule, defines and enhances the principle of negotiating incorporated joint ventures in line with the provisions of the bill. Third schedule, defines the domestic-based price and pricing framework of gas under a free market structure of willing buyer, willing seller. Fourth schedule, provides the formula for a gas price for other gas-based industries with the possibility of creating flexibility with respect to the pricing structures where market conditions change. Fifth schedule, explains with clarity capital allowances as it relates to the use and disposal of oil and gas assets. Sixth schedule, defines production allowances, cost price ratio limits in the oil and gas industry. Seventh schedule, explains the main physical framework of the bill, which covers petroleum fees, rents, royalties across the various production terrains, as well as its related penalties for non-payment. Eighth schedule, deals with the creation of the Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated to legalize the shareholding of NNPC Limited with provisions required for the creation of the same. Observations. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, in line with the views canvassed by stakeholders and members of the public at the hearing sessions, as well as subsequent analysis of the presentation vis-a-vis the provisions of this bill, the Joint Committee hereby observes that the intent of the bill is laudable and commendable, as its passage by the Senate will bring the long-awaited change in the oil and gas industry. Two, that stakeholders were in total support of the passage of the bill, and there were no dissenting voice opposing its passage. Three, that the passage of this bill will no doubt enhance the growth of oil and gas industry, modernize the physical systems, enhance global competitiveness, as well as peaceful, harmonious operating environment and maximum returns on investment. Finally, recommendations. After a meticulous evaluation and analysis of submissions, observations, and the preponderance of views expressed in support of the proposed legislation, the Joint Committee hereby recommends that the Senate do approve the attached recommendation of the Joint Committee on Downstream Petroleum Sector, Petroleum Upstream Gas and Gas on a bill for an act to provide for legal governance and regulatory framework, physical framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and for related matters 2021, SB 510. In conclusion, the Joint Committee wishes to appreciate the entire Senate and its leadership for the opportunity and confident repose on us to serve in this capacity. Mr. President, I so submit.